Join with me now in the prayer of approach. O God of mercy, it is because of your great gift of love that we are drawn to commit our lives in service to all about us. Help us to serve faithfully. Teach us to remember that no matter how young or elderly we may be, there is always something we can do to further your kingdom. And in this continuing process, we will belong to you forever. We ask you to bless our service of worship this morning and guide us through the tomorrows of this week. Amen. Amen. One of the aspects of life is supposedly to help one another. There was once an elderly lady who lived alone at the edge of the village. Her husband had passed away, but she was spry and able to look after herself in this little cottage and took great pride in her garden. Every spring she would be down on her knees planting new plants, perennials that she had would be trimmed and made ready for another year. But her pathway from the front gate to the house always had annuals of one kind or another. So you can very well imagine her unhappiness and sadness when she opened the door one Sunday morning and discovered all the plants pulled out from the flower beds and tossed onto the lawn. Who would do this? Who would deliberately vandalize the garden? She had an idea that it was a number of the local boys in town, but she couldn't prove it because they would come and in the stealth of night and do that. And so she went back down on her knees again and replanted the plants that she could find. And once again, the little garden looked good. But a couple of 3 days later, when she opened the door, the same thing had happened. And she got really, really upset. Nobody seemed to catch these people. Nobody seemed to know who they were. One day, however, this was a little later on, when the weather was warm, she had a problem. And the problem was that her check had not come in at the end of the month as it was supposed to. And so she had no extra money for groceries. And she was very upset. And so she went to her knees and she prayed that the good Lord would find some way to bring her food. Coincidentally, the gang of young lads who had caused her so much trouble were outside her open window and heard her praying. They quietly left, and when they got out of earshot, they got together and said, praying, what's she praying to? God doesn't answer prayers. She's just flapping her gums. I know, said one of the lads. We will provide the groceries. How much have you got? So the 5 lads put their hands in their pockets and got out some money and went off to the local store. And they bought canned soup, loaf of bread, butter, jam. Of course, in those days, things didn't cost as much as they do today. And a few vegetables and maybe a pound of meat, something like that. It wasn't venison, but it was being ground beef. Anyhow, and the lady had finished her praying and went to the kitchen to boil some water. And while she was gone, the lad snuck back up to the open window and tossed all all the stuff through the window. And of course, you imagine the noise, the cans of soup and beans and things landed there. Bang, bang, she hurried through. And she fell to her knees. She says, "Thank you, God, thank you, thank you, thank you." And the voice from out said, "God didn't bring it, we did." "Well, thank you," said the elderly lady. He said, "Why don't you come in and talk?" Of course, they looked at each other. "We'd come in and visit. Why would we visit?" But they came in and sat down, and they chatted and they visited together. And the strange thing about it was that they began to change. "You know," said the lady, "you mocked my prayer, but did you ever consider the fact that God used you to bring me the food?" And they looked at one another. "Gee, never thought of that." And so they apologized for pulling up her plants and giving her such a hard time. And a good relationship developed between the elderly lady and the young lads. And if anybody dared hurt her in any way, they were right there to protect her. So from being miserable and downright cruel, they did a complete turnaround and became her guardians and helped her not only with her garden, but with other chores that had to be done that she couldn't look after or do anymore. God works in mysterious ways, his wonders to perform. The other illustration has to do with World War II, where one of the buddies was killed in action. His two friends asked the local priest to bury, if they could bury him in the cemetery there. And the priest said, no, that was forbidden. He was a Protestant, this is a Catholic cemetery. And so they went away upset. But they did bury him just outside the fence of the Catholic cemetery. A few years later, they happened to return to the scene of the battle and found that it was the same priest and said, well, can you show us where the body is, the grave is, because we can't find it. And we know that we buried him outside the fence. And the priest said, you know, he said, I got so upset after you left about the fact that your loved one was not buried in the cemetery that I went out and moved the fence. God works in mysterious ways. Think on it. Music.